Most of human life is organized around a strange and mostly invisible habit. Again and again, we make choices based on how we think we will feel later. We choose jobs, partners, cities, routines, purchases, ambitions, and sacrifices because we imagine that some futures will feel better than others. We move toward what we expect will satisfy us and away from what we believe will hurt us. In this sense, a large part of living is emotional prediction. Stumbling on Happiness by Daniel Gilbert begins with a simple but destabilizing idea. Human beings are not very good at this kind of prediction. We believe we know what will make us happy. We believe we know what will devastate us. We believe that if we can just imagine the future clearly enough, we can choose well. But Gilbert argues that the mind's image of the future is often deeply flawed. This is what makes the book so compelling. It is not really a conventional self-help book about how to become happy. It is a book about why we are so bad at forecasting happiness in the first place. It asks why people so often pursue futures that do not satisfy them as expected, and fear futures that turn out to be far more livable than they imagined. Gilbert's answer is that the brain is an extraordinary simulator, but not an accurate one. It can construct futures, rehearse possibilities, and create emotional expectations with remarkable speed. Yet those mental simulations are incomplete, biased, and distorted by the present. We imagine too narrowly, remember too selectively, and fail to understand how adaptable we really are. As we move through this summary, we will explore the book's central insight, that the mind's effort to predict future happiness is one of its most impressive abilities and one of its most reliable sources of error. We will look at why imagination misleads us, why memory does not rescue us, why major life events do not dominate happiness as much as we expect, and why our hidden psychological resilience is stronger than we know. What emerges is not a cynical picture of happiness, but a humbler and more useful one. One of Gilbert's starting points is that the human brain is built not only to perceive the present, but to construct the future. This ability is one of the mind's great achievements. People can imagine themselves tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now. They can run mental experiments, compare possibilities, and choose among paths before actually walking them. In practical terms, this is enormously valuable. Without it, planning, ambition, caution, and long-term life design would be almost impossible. The capacity to imagine the future is so natural that we rarely stop to notice how extraordinary it is. We project ourselves forward effortlessly. We picture future conversations, victories, embarrassments, pleasures, and losses. We do not merely react to life. We live partly in anticipation of it. But Gilbert's point is that this gift has a serious weakness. The future we imagine is not the future we will live. It is a simulation created in the present by a mind with limited information, selective attention, and strong emotional distortions. We are not looking ahead through a clean window. We are building a model, and that model leaves crucial things out. This matters because our decisions depend on these inner models. If we imagine success as permanent fulfillment or failure as permanent devastation, then we will choose under the influence of emotional forecasts that may not resemble reality. The more confidence we place in those forecasts, the more vulnerable we become to disappointment and misunderstanding. Gilbert does not deny that imagination is useful. It clearly is. But he wants readers to stop treating imagined futures as though they are reliable emotional maps. They are sketches, not realities. And once we understand that, a deeper question emerges: what exactly goes wrong when we use imagination to predict happiness? A major reason people mispredict happiness, Gilbert argues, is that imagination is incomplete. When we picture a future event, we usually focus on the most vivid and emotionally obvious features of that event. If we imagine getting a promotion, we focus on success, recognition, pride, and reward. If we imagine a breakup, we focus on loneliness, grief, and rejection. If we imagine moving to a new city, We picture novelty, beauty, freedom, or perhaps disorientation and loss. The problem is not that these features are false. The problem is that they are partial. Real life is never made of one feature alone. The promotion comes with paperwork, fatigue, office politics, commuting, routine, and new anxieties. The breakup comes with distractions, unexpected relief, support from others, changed habits, and gradual adaptation. The new city becomes not just a symbol, but a place where groceries must be bought, mornings must be endured, friendships must be built, and daily life must continue. Gilbert shows that the imagination tends to isolate the event from its surrounding context. It highlights what is dramatic and ignores what is ordinary. This makes future emotions look more concentrated and more stable than they will actually be. This is one reason people overestimate the lasting emotional impact of major life events. The imagined future is like a spotlight shining on one object in a dark room. But real experience is like living in the full room, where many things compete for attention and emotional dominance. The narrowness of imagination also creates false certainty. Because the simulation feels vivid, it feels complete. We mistake detail for accuracy. But vividness often reflects the intensity of what we have imagined, not the completeness of what we have included. The lesson here is subtle and important. It is not that we should stop imagining the future. It is that we should distrust the emotional totality of our simulations. If a future seems guaranteed to satisfy or devastate us, that may be less a sign of truth than a sign that the mind has built too small a picture. Another of Gilbert's key insights is that people exaggerate the emotional power of major life events. This happens because when we imagine the future, we tend to grant central events a starring role. We imagine that a marriage, a career breakthrough, a public humiliation, an illness, a rejection, or a personal achievement will dominate emotional life in a continuous way. But lived experience is more fragmented than that. Even major events must coexist with traffic, errands, headaches, emails, conversations, weather, household chores, fatigue, laughter, boredom, and all the small interruptions that make up actual days. Real life dilutes what imagination intensifies. This is not to say that major events do not matter. Of course they do. Gilbert's point is that they often matter less continuously than we expect. The emotional system is shaped not only by significance, but by attention. And attention moves. People become absorbed by daily routines, new concerns, and changing contexts faster than they predict. The forecasting mind resists this truth because it imagines events as symbols. A promotion symbolizes worth. A breakup symbolizes failure or abandonment. A house symbolizes security. A diagnosis symbolizes catastrophe. But the experiencing mind does not live inside symbols all day. It lives in moments. This helps explain why people can work so hard for imagined transformations and still feel underwhelmed once those transformations arrive. It also explains why feared outcomes often become less overwhelming than expected. The future does not arrive as a single emotional verdict. It arrives as life. Gilbert's broader lesson is that happiness is less governed by the dramatic architecture of our life story than we like to think. It is shaped partly by that story, yes, but also by the countless ordinary experiences that our forecasts tend to ignore. One of the most memorable and hopeful ideas in Stumbling on Happiness is Gilbert's description of the psychological immune system. This is his term for the mental processes that help human beings recover from disappointment, reinterpret painful events, and restore emotional balance after things go wrong. Most people know they have a physical immune system, but far fewer appreciate how strong their psychological immune system can be. When imagining negative futures, we tend to focus on the immediate pain. We picture the humiliation, the loneliness, the frustration, the regret. What we fail to picture is the mind's own hidden capacity to adapt. After bad events, people often begin to reframe their circumstances, change what they value, find meaning in new realities, or quietly revise their expectations. They do not necessarily choose this process consciously. Much of it happens automatically. The mind starts working to make life livable again. This is crucial because emotional forecasting usually ignores it. We imagine the pain, but not the repair. We imagine the loss, but not the adaptation. We imagine the wound, but not the healing. Gilbert's point is not naive optimism. He is not claiming that all bad events become good, or that people can simply think their way out of suffering. Rather, he is showing that human beings are more resilient than they predict. The emotional future after disappointment is not just raw pain stretched across time. It includes interpretation, adjustment, coping, and recovery. This has enormous practical implications. It means that many feared futures are not as emotionally destructive as they appear from a distance. People often overestimate how miserable they would be if things went wrong because they underestimate their own capacity to make peace with what happens. In this sense, one of the mind's greatest forecasting errors comes from ignorance of its own strength. We do not know how effectively we can survive outcomes we would now classify as unbearable. That ignorance drives fear, avoidance, and sometimes misguided decision-making. Gilbert offers a powerful correction. You are not only worse at imagining pain than you think. You are also worse at imagining your own resilience. If imagination misleads us about the future, it might seem that memory could help. We could look back on earlier experiences and ask what truly made us happy, what disappointed us, and what emotional patterns life has already revealed. But Gilbert shows that memory is not a clean archive of experience. It is selective, reconstructive, and shaped by the stories we tell ourselves afterward. People often remember highlights, endings, shocks, and emotionally charged moments more vividly than the ordinary flow of experience. They may recall a vacation as wonderful because of a few special scenes, while forgetting the boredom, inconvenience, or tension that filled much of the time. Or they may remember a difficult period as entirely miserable while overlooking moments of connection, humor, or calm. This matters because when we use memory to predict the future, we are often using distorted data. The remembered self and the experiencing self do not always agree. What we think happened emotionally is not always what we actually lived from moment to moment. Gilbert's broader lesson is that people cannot rely entirely on introspection when trying to understand happiness. The mind that imagines badly also remembers selectively. So the idea that we can simply consult our feelings, consult our memories, and derive reliable emotional wisdom becomes much more questionable. This is not meant to make life feel unknowable. It is meant to show that confidence about future happiness should be softer. If the inner sources we trust most, imagination and memory, are both flawed, then humility becomes more rational than certainty. And this prepares the way for one of the book's most provocative claims. If we cannot trust private simulation completely, perhaps we should pay more attention to the actual experiences of other people. One of the most surprising and practical ideas in the book is that when trying to forecast our future happiness, other people may often provide better evidence than our own imagination. This sounds strange at first because modern culture strongly encourages the belief that happiness is intensely personal, unique, and private. We assume that no one can really know what will make us happy except us. Gilbert challenges that confidence. He argues that while people certainly differ in tastes and circumstances, human emotional systems are similar enough that the experiences of others can serve as useful guides. If you want to know what it is like to have children, retire, get rich, move somewhere far away, or pursue a particular life path, it may be more informative to ask people who have already done it than to trust your own simulation. Yet people often resist this. We think our case is special. We believe we will react differently. We assume our imagined future is more nuanced and more tailored to us than anyone else's testimony could be. Gilbert suggests this is often a mistake. The imagination feels vivid, and vividness tricks us into trusting it. The appeal of private forecasting is emotional as much as intellectual. It preserves a sense of individuality and control. Listening to others means admitting that some truths about happiness are discoverable through evidence rather than through fantasy. It means accepting that our inner pictures may not be the best maps. This is one of the book's most useful lessons because it offers a real corrective. If imagination is biased and memory is selective, then public emotional data becomes valuable. The lived reports of others, especially many others, may reveal patterns our simulations hide. Gilbert is not saying that we should outsource all self-understanding. He is saying that when it comes to predicting future emotional states, humility should lead us toward evidence. And sometimes the most relevant evidence is not inside our heads at all. Another reason happiness is hard to forecast is that the present self has a habit of assuming it will remain psychologically central in the future. When we imagine what will make us happy later, we do so from inside our current desires, fears, moods, and values. The problem is that the self who will actually live that future may not think quite the same way. If we are lonely now, we may imagine future companionship as overwhelmingly important. If we are ambitious now, we may imagine future achievement as emotionally decisive. If we are hurt now, we may imagine future safety as the supreme good. But future selves will inhabit different contexts. They will have adapted, learned, tired, shifted priorities, and changed in subtle ways. Gilbert's point is that the forecasting self often projects current feelings forward too rigidly. It assumes continuity where there will in fact be change. This makes future emotional predictions unstable because they are anchored too heavily in the needs of the present moment. This happens constantly. People shop when hungry and imagine future desire through present appetite. They commit when infatuated and imagine future love through present intensity. They avoid risk when afraid and imagine future pain through present anxiety. In each case, the present emotional state acts like a lens, tinting the forecast. The broader lesson is that the future will be inhabited by a person who is related to you, but not identical to who you are right now. Forgetting this leads people to make decisions that serve the emotional weather of the present more than the actual life of the future. This is not an argument for distrust of feeling altogether. It is a reminder that feelings are local. They belong to the moment. Wisdom begins when we stop treating the current self as a perfect representative of all the selves we have yet to become. Gilbert also explores a theme that feels especially relevant to modern life, the relationship between choice and happiness. It seems obvious that more freedom should produce more satisfaction. If we can revise decisions, change course easily, and keep options open, then surely we are more likely to arrive at the best possible life. But the book complicates this assumption. Sometimes, Gilbert suggests, the ability to reverse a decision makes happiness harder, not easier. When choices remain open, comparison remains active. Doubt stays alive. Regret continues to whisper that something better may still be available. The mind does not fully settle. By contrast, when a choice becomes fixed, the psychological immune system often begins helping us make peace with it. We adjust. We commit. We find value in what is ours rather than obsessing over what is not. In this sense, limitation can sometimes support satisfaction. This is a counterintuitive insight because it challenges the ideal of perfect optionality. We often imagine that happiness depends on preserving escape routes. Yet, too much reversibility may weaken the very mental processes that allow us to love what we have chosen. Gilbert is not romanticizing imprisonment or lack of freedom. He is pointing to a real psychological pattern. Commitment changes experience. It narrows comparison and strengthens adaptation. The finality of a choice can create conditions in which contentment becomes easier. This theme fits the book's larger message beautifully. The conscious mind believes it wants maximum flexibility because it imagines happiness as a matter of always being able to optimize. But the emotional mind may thrive more through acceptance, adjustment, and invested participation than through endless revision. Sometimes happiness requires not better forecasting, but deeper commitment to the life actually being lived. As Gilbert's ideas accumulate, a difficult but illuminating question appears. If people are so bad at predicting happiness, what exactly are they doing when they chase certain goals so intensely? Much of the answer lies in the way imagination dramatizes outcomes. Wealth, beauty, status, prestige, romance, victory, and recognition appear in simulation as emotionally decisive. They seem like gateways to stable fulfillment. But because the simulations are narrow and distorted, the mind often mistakes emotional intensity for lasting satisfaction. It imagines the thrill of success, but neglects adaptation. It imagines the glow of achievement, but ignores the ordinary life surrounding it. It imagines escape from pain, but forgets that every new condition eventually becomes normal. This does not mean goals are worthless. Achievement matters. Love matters. Security matters. Gilbert's point is more subtle. We often pursue things with inflated emotional expectations. We burden external outcomes with promises they cannot fully keep. That is why people may arrive at wanted futures and feel strangely unchanged. The object was acquired, but the predicted transformation did not arrive in the expected form. Daily consciousness resumed its ordinary rhythm. The major gain became part of life instead of becoming life itself. The danger is not only disappointment. It is misallocation. We may spend enormous energy avoiding futures that would be manageable and chasing futures that will not satisfy us proportionately. In this sense, poor emotional forecasting shapes the architecture of entire lives. Gilbert's corrective is not asceticism. It is realism. Desire should be tempered by the knowledge that imagined futures are unreliable. Fear should be softened by the knowledge that adaptation is stronger than expected. And ambition should be guided by evidence rather than by fantasy alone. One of the most valuable effects of stumbling on happiness is that it encourages a new kind of humility. Not pessimism and not passivity, but humility about our own forecasting power. The book suggests that many of the strongest emotions attached to the future, longing, dread, certainty, urgency, are shaped by mental processes we do not see clearly. This humility changes how we relate to both desire and fear. When something looks like the key to happiness, we can remember that our simulations are incomplete. When something looks like the end of happiness, we can remember that our resilience is underestimated. When memory tells a clean story about what has always made us happy, we can remember that memory edits. When present emotion tries to rule the future, we can remember that future selves will not feel exactly as we do now. There is something quietly liberating in this. The burden of perfect life design becomes lighter. If our minds are poor prophets, then the pressure to map every future emotional consequence with precision is misplaced. We can still choose carefully, but with less illusion of mastery. Gilbert's work does not eliminate uncertainty. It makes uncertainty more honest. Instead of pretending that we know exactly what will satisfy us, we can approach life with more curiosity, more openness to revision, and more attention to actual evidence. This attitude is not weak. It may be wiser than the confidence that drives so much striving. To know that you do not fully know what will make you happy is not a failure of self-knowledge. It is a deeper and more realistic form of it. Although stumbling on happiness is rich with theory, its practical implications are substantial. First, it encourages readers to distrust vivid emotional forecasts, especially when those forecasts are built around major life events imagined in isolation. If a future looks overwhelmingly glorious or overwhelmingly unbearable, pause and ask what ordinary context has been left out. Second, the book suggests listening more seriously to the experiences of other people. Instead of relying only on private fantasy, gather real emotional data. What do people who have actually lived this future say about it? Patterns across many lives may be more reliable than your own internal movie. Third, remember adaptation. You will likely adjust more than you think, both upward and downward. This means feared outcomes may not destroy you as completely as imagined, and desired outcomes may not transform you as permanently as expected. Fourth, treat present emotion with caution when making future-facing choices. The self making the decision is temporary. Hunger, loneliness, excitement, anger, ambition, and insecurity are poor substitutes for a longer view. Fifth, recognize the role of commitment. Sometimes satisfaction grows not from keeping all options open, but from allowing adaptation to deepen around a chosen path. These lessons do not produce certainty. They produce better questions. And often, better questions are the beginning of wiser choices. Gilbert's practical gift is not a formula for happiness. It is a set of corrections to the mind's most common forecasting mistakes. If we cannot become perfect predictors of our future feelings, we can at least become less easily misled by our own confidence. Stumbling on happiness remains so powerful because it reveals a paradox at the heart of human life. We organize ourselves around the future, yet we understand that future emotionally far less well than we imagine. We are storytellers, planners, dreamers, and avoiders, all guided by feelings we have not yet felt and futures we do not yet know. Daniel Gilbert's achievement is not to mock that condition, but to illuminate it. He shows that our simulations are incomplete, our memories are selective, our current emotions distort our forecasts, and our hidden resilience is stronger than expected. He shows that the futures we chase may not satisfy us as dramatically as imagined, and the futures we fear may not break us as completely as expected. Yet the book is not cynical. It does not say that happiness is impossible or meaningless. It says that happiness is difficult to predict because the mind that predicts it is imperfect. And that imperfection calls not for despair, but for humility. Perhaps that is the deepest wisdom of the book. We stumble on happiness not only because life is uncertain, but because we keep trusting a forecasting system that feels more accurate than it is. To live more wisely is not to stop hoping or choosing. It is to choose with softer certainty, deeper curiosity, and greater respect for evidence, adaptation, and the human capacity to find meaning in places imagination never knew to look. In the end, happiness may not always be where we think it is. But understanding why we miss it is already a step toward living more honestly, and perhaps more gently, inside the futures that eventually arrive.